In other words, it will play any record, whether 78, 45, 33 and a third, 16 and 2/3, or the new living stereo record.
In this episode, we talk about the definition of indie, the word itself, the culture, the genre that sparked from it, and from that, what it means to sell out. And if you stay to the end of the episode, you get like a little secret. I don't fucking know.
Rambles and Records.
Billy.
Yeah.
Do you know what indie means?
Short for independent.
Correct. I think it initially meant you're not signed to one of the three major labels, i.e. Universal, Sony or Warner.
Makes sense.
But then from there, I think it developed a lot of other meanings. So I guess it's a DIY thing as well. So it's doing the production yourself, distribution, press, gig booking. Over time, though, indie has evolved into a genre. It's also then evolved into indie rock, indie pop, and it's that sound, that jangly, often kind of melancholic,
I'm really
quirky
curious
lyrics.
to hear if this is going to go where I think it's going, but I don't want to spoil it just in case.
And you know what? If it doesn't, you run with it. But ironically, a lot of indie bands then sign to major labels.
Yeah.
So
It's a big industry now.
it is its own aesthetic rather than the original meaning. So culturally, underground credibility and resisting the mainstream is how it started. But now in 2025, it's less about who owns what and more about how you operate. Do you put the art first, basically? Do you respect your audience? Do you build culture? Legally, the lines are still blurred. Many like indie labels now have distribution deals with major labels, or they sell bigger stakes to bigger companies. But I don't think though that makes them automatically a sellout. It is all just like based on their situation, and overall it complicates the definitions.
The word starts off having a meaning and then it takes a life of its own, but also people capitalized on it in the meantime.
Like early 2000s indie, like
So-
British indie.
So I thought you were going to go there because it became so saturated, the market. And I've actually had a bit of a nostalgia trip this week on this very topic. I read an article this week about Landfill Indie. I think it was 50 greatest Landfill Indie songs or something on Vice or Noisy. There was bands like Larrikin Love on there, Young Knives, Maximo Park. The Arctic Monkeys' Mighty Bum made it on the list as well, even though they disclaimed that Arctic Monkeys aren't a Landfill Indie band, but that was a Landfill Indie song.
I just want to piss off all the Arctic Monkeys fans.
Basically, they just put like adolescence in the bin in one article. It was a bit of a...
It's a bit of a kick in the dick, really.
Yeah. It was a bit of a self-deprecating... They clearly loved it, but they didn't want to admit it because they're from Vice, so they probably had to pretend that they're too cool for it.
Or like...
Scouting for Girls.
Scouting for Girls. The Wombats.
Two-Door Cinema Club.
Yeah.
Oh, the Wombats, yeah.
The Wombats is a good shout.
Maccabees and Bombay Bicycle Club made the list as well.
Yeah.
So, on one hand, I think it is fair to say that it wasn't the cultural highlight of British exports, like looking back in terms of all the different periods. But it was a fun thing to be around for. Like, it didn't feel like there was a lack of inspirational music, even if it's not aged that well now.
It's like a lot of things. I think at least it was a scene. At least it had its own look, feel.
I mean, I'm not sure if Bad Cardigans counts as a look, but...
Free button Y-neck T-shirts from Top Man. Drain pipe jeans.
It was basically just Top Man, Alka-Pops, and
H&M.
But it's like indie, that period of indie where it did kind of just dominate for like 15 years or whatever. It was the opposite of indie because like everybody dressed the same. Yeah. And everybody was like making very similar sounding music.
Exactly.
And there was all the major labels signing as many indie bands as possible.
And that's kind of like grunge in the 90s. It was the capitalized version of what was initially supposed to be something ironically the opposite of what it became.
Rambles and records.
What you're going to hear about today is nothing short of a miracle. It's dramatically new.
The reason why I'm initially bringing this up is because in recent news, Merge Records have been acquired by Secretly Group. So 50% of their stake has essentially gone to Secretly Group. Merge Records, they're a label behind releases from Neutral Milk Hotel, Arcade Fire, most notably. They've now officially signed a deal with Secretly, who currently own other indie labels such as Dead Oceans, Jaguar, Satisfactory, and Secretly Canadian. So all of those are pretty big labels, and it stirred a little bit of a discussion behind what that means. Merge itself was a bedroom-founded label. It gives the impression of to some that this is selling out because of the way they went about starting. But I want to touch on this maybe being more about camaraderie and survival of whatever the fuck indie means, whilst keeping independent integrity through being with Secretly Group. It gains global distribution, it improves like team support, professional infrastructure, benefiting artists and audiences alike. And I just want to dig a little bit into like what is selling out. Selling out 101.
Okay.
So it's hard because indie acts tend to stick to their roots. I guess it's more to slander if you see an indie artist do it. One thing that I thought was quite interesting was Black Eyed Peas. Now, Black Eyed Peas started out as a socially conscious alternative rap group.
Really?
Yeah, they did. They were very kind of DIY. Fergie weren't in the band.
Mm-hmm.
They had a different lead singer, and they were going off that basis of more alt rap, more like Fugees, I would say.
Okay.
You know, but
Yeah.
then they came out with more EDM pop type shit.
Mm-hmm.
Fergie got involved, and it's all like, let's get it started. LED glasses,
There was
huge success, zero underground credibility. And that's an example, I guess, that I thought was like starting out more indie, more,
absolutely.
So selling out in a nutshell, it's kind of often when a pivot to profit overshadows your artistic intent. Artists need to earn money.
Mm-hmm.
Labels need to scale. But whenever money enters the room on a higher level, anyway, in terms of improving, credibility often goes out the window. And, you do something you love, you're noble, you're an artist. You might not be able to eat, but at least you're creating shit that you love. And then that means that the work gets full credibility and respect. But then if you do anything for pay, you've changed. Why don't you sound like the first album? It turns into that very quickly. And even if music stays solid, the perception or your overall image can be fractured. And that's the core of this indie dilemma. Success itself starts to feel suspicious.
Yeah. It's a bit unfair when you're sat in your cozy house with Netflix on and food full of fridge. Not food full of fridge.
Food full of fridge.
Having it go on Reddit because your favourite artist who hasn't eaten for 2 weeks and has been working his bollocks off to entertain you decides that somebody offering to pay them a lot of money has allowed them to have a more comfortable reward for the work that they've been
better
doing.
life. You want them to stay as that artist and not as a human being, which is really fucked up if you think about it. It's like
It's difficult as well because once you've kind of got to a certain level and you have certain levels of fame or success, you are no longer the same teenager that was struggling with real life problems like other people and singing about real world things that people could relate to, because now your experience is about completely different things. you're not going to be able to convincingly sing about going to the bar with your mates and not being able to get with the girl or whatever.
Down the back of the bar and you was drinking WKD and I thought, oh shit, you look nice and I'm going to get in my Bentley now and go home to my big fucking massive mansion.
Was it the Sheffield accent intentional?
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Here's another interesting concept. Can you unsell out? Like, oops, sorry, dropped the ball there. Fuck, didn't mean to. Here's an example. Radiohead.
As an unsellout.
As an unsellout. Because after OK Computer, they flirted with fame. They started doing like MTV stuff and getting a little bit more full-on mainstream.
Yeah.
And then they obliterated people's expectations with Kid A because they were sick of the fame. No merch drops, no singles, no, distribute. Fuck this. Just a dense, like strange masterpiece of an album, like really out there, nothing like the album before, almost as if to say fuck you, went a bit too far into the mainstream, but it was almost like a reboot for their credibility.
I think that's fair, and they're also a band that I think hasn't been scared to continue to do what they want and reinvent themselves a lot. But off the back of that, that's reminded me of another example where it hasn't worked out so well for them, but they tried something similar. And that's MGMT. Obviously, they had one of the biggest albums of the year of whatever when it came out. But the same thing happened. They were like, oh shit, like we're too big now. And they felt like they'd sold out maybe with that. So they did the same thing. They released their second album, which was intentionally kind of really out there and not poppy at all. And people just didn't get it. And it didn't work for them like it did for Radiohead. And occasionally I do see their name pop up in the footnotes of certain blogs or music sites or whatever. But you don't really hear about it unless you happen to see it on accident.
MGMT, it's a good shout. I think MGMT will be like Bowie in a way, where the persona or the thing that they were trying to do will get recognized like 10 years later. Because Bowie was the king of that. He was so ahead of the time that he just kind of kept recreating himself.
It took him a while,
people
didn't it?
They couldn't keep up with it. They were going, like, fuck, this is too unfamiliar for me to even understand.
Maybe that's another good example for the unsellout as well. He kind of retired his Ziggy Stardust when that got huge, and then
True.
Did his
Tin Machine is a perfect example of people are still trying to understand that.
My dad was actually a huge fan of that album. That's probably one of the Bowie albums I'm most familiar with.
Yeah, but again, that's one of those things. I think Tin Machine, 90s Bowie grows on people. It is one of those things I wouldn't be surprised in 5 years' time I listen to it. I go, oh, right, okay, I get it. Anyway, does Merge's deal with Secretly Group feel like a sellout? I don't think so. I think there's a lot of positives to it. I think it's inspirational in terms of sticking with that perfect balance of improving your distribution and your exposure whilst being around like-minded people and still having your creative artistic freedom, which is the ultimate most important thing about it at the end of the day. As long as you can keep that and you can make some money and not change what it is that you're doing, then more power to you.
Rambles and records.
Yet both are coming from one record, one groove, picked up by one stylist. Almost like playing two different tunes on the same violin at the same time.
Wait. Before you pivot too far from the topic of sellouts, the one that came to my mind didn't come up, so I'm going to bring it up now. Do you remember the John Lydon butter advert?
Yes! Thank you, Farmer's Wife.
Yeah.
Such a culture shock, like the
John
mix
Lydon in a tweed suit in a farmhouse, like...
All because he's made only from British milk. My country life, because I love the taste of me crumpets. Thank you, Farmer's Wife. It's not about Great Britain, it's about Great Butter.
That's great, man. That's an example of selling out.
That
Sorry.
was peak sellout, I guess, in British culture.
Yeah.
I think I remember at the time as well seeing him on Jules Holland at some point performing with Pulp. He did kind of address it and was just like, well, like the music that I do it on my own terms, and I guess he kind of doesn't have major label backing for that, and doing things like that helps him pay for making the art that he wants to make. And you can't really argue with that, can you?
Counter argument. If it's your pocket money to make your art and it's not going to change the music that you make,
Yeah.
then what is the problem?
It's a
And
pretty
he's kind of
harmless
taking
advert.
the piss out of it a little bit as well. You could tell the way he's doing it. He's trying to go with that angle of
Anti-establishment kind of thing.
anti-establishment, shut up and pay me sort of thing.
I can definitely understand why a lot of people might be upset by it.
Yeah,
But then I guess as well, you can also consider that Sex Pistols were a manufactured band in the first place. So
True.
Rambles and records.
And together they give us the fullness of living stereo.
So last week I found out that Alice Cooper is releasing an album with the original band, and they've also announced a very intimate 900 capacity show in London on the 24th of July at the Union Chapel in London. So just for like a bit of additional context, Alice Cooper originally rose to fame, yes, it was the early 70s. Of course, Vincent Furnier, who was the singer, who later became Alice Cooper. So originally Alice Cooper was the name of the band. Like the band were kind of maybe falling apart a little bit. A few of them had alcohol problems. So basically the manager saw an opportunity to make a solo career for Alice, got him to legally change his name to Alice Cooper so that he could continue the band on his own, because he wouldn't be able to get sued for copyright because it was his own name. So he'd just be performing under his name.
Wow. No way, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and
That's a good little loophole.
the rest of the band members didn't really see a lot of success afterwards. They have had little projects here and there in the meantime, but this marks the first album that they've done together musically in 50 years. I
That's cool,
believe
man.
the original drummer, Neil Smith, went on to become like a car salesman or real estate agent or something. Cut his hair, got a suit, looked smart.
Yeah, Alice Cooper, you heard of him? She's them people that's like, oh, my brother's cousin used to be a roadie for Alice Cooper.
Yeah,
You know, it's like, oh, great. So,
yeah, thanks.
I just realised I said brother's cousin. It's obviously just your cousin, ain't it?
He puts on a great show. I've seen him live a couple of times, and he's definitely an entertainer, and he's an interesting guy to hear as well in interviews and stuff. But creatively, from a music perspective, I think the peak really was in that original band. They're not doing it for money. They're doing it obviously because they can, and it's fun for them. But it just got me thinking about like, who's the reunion really for? Is it for them or is it for the audience?
It's a full circle thing, I imagine. There've probably been a lot of burnt bridges and arguments and crap that's happened throughout the years. A lot of bands very rarely part amicably. And years pass and they get older and they think, you know what, let's just make amends and have one last sort of blowout. I think that's why Sabbath's doing it in July, and I can understand it from that standpoint of just burying the hatchet, because it's our last chance is another thing, because, morbidly saying it, you ain't got long left to not. And then also, yeah, it is to do with the fans as well. So to think that they did everything to ensure that the fans got what they want, even at the end.
But there's a difference between what Alice Cooper's doing and what Ozzy Osbourne's doing. Like, the Ozzy Osbourne show is obviously a live performance playing the hits. Whereas this, with the Alice Cooper show, they're releasing a new album with new original content.
I hope it strips it way back to its roots, and they purposefully put a very rough, low budget element to it to take it back to where it began.
But I don't think I can afford Alice Cooper 3 weeks after Sabbath. Yeah. I've heard someone's been kicked off the bill as well, but I don't know.
And then apparently everyone was like, "Oh, it's Tool," and then Tool
it wasn't
like,
Tool.
"It's not Tool," which adds more drama, doesn't it? Who is it? Oh,
Yeah.
We'll find out. Turns out it was Tool.
I was wondering if it. Yeah, imagine. Got ya. I was wondering if it would be Metallica, because I think, that Sharon recently had been very vocal about Kneecap and their statements at Coachella. Don't know if you heard about that.
No, not really.
It's pretty fucked, actually. So Kneecap at Coachella basically said, free Palestine, fuck Israel. And then Sharon's, for some reason, gotten on this morning and whatever TV programs and been
Fuck's
like,
sake.
no, Kneecap should have their visas revoked and kicked out of America because you shouldn't bring politics to music and blah, blah, blah. Your husband sang War Pigs. So,
Oh, shit. Is that what Kneecap said?
yeah.
Oh,
Have-
fair enough,
yeah.
man. Fucking hell. That's 5 words. That's all that needed. 5 words to
Yeah.
completely obliterate you, man.
Like,
Your husband sung War Pigs. It's
so
true.
that wasn't very cool of Sharon.
Sharon's always doing that. You'd think Sharon is in Black Sabbath. Why is she so front-facing?
I don't know. I don't know. She's like has become the face of the brand, hasn't she? Almost.
Yeah. Well, I know why, because Don Arden was her dad. He run Jet Records, and she just got raised up in that way and did the same. She knows how to promote, and she knows how to be at the front of the media to help the cause that she's promoting and doing. So, but at the end of the day, she can, because all the proceeds are going to charity. So you do your thing, Sharon.
Rambles and records.
All right then. Well, wrapping this up, mate. I've got an album recommendation. Speaking about keeping it authentic whilst moving forward, Pulp have brought out a new album. It is called More, and it is their first new album in 24 years. And I'd say it's definitely worth a listen. I think it was a really, really good album.
Sick. I've heard good things. I haven't listened to it yet, but I'll definitely check that out.
Really, really enjoyed it, genuinely. It's almost as if they haven't aged a day.
That's great.
Especially considering how long it's been since they've released something. And yeah, just love
You know
everything
what?
about it. Released on Rough Trade as well, which is really cool.
That's actually kind of what I was trying to get out with my point. Is like, when bands reunite, do they ever get that magic back? And I'm glad to hear that they can.
Exactly. It rarely happens, but this was why I loved the album as well, because it's almost reinstating your faith in it being worth it. And also going back onto like indie stuff, there's a bit of a link in terms of like both stories, creativity that matures without disappearing. Over time, you may sign a deal or you may have a 24-year hiatus, but it doesn't mean that when you bring out your next thing that it won't be good.
Yeah. That's
So
great. I'm eager to check that out.
Yeah. There's the main single, Spike Island, opening track, really, really good track. It has themes of aging, desire, regret, middle age, reflection, lyrics that are sometimes witty and frank, and to be honest, occasionally a bit sleazy. There's a song called My Sex on it that made me cringe a little bit, I'm not gonna lie. But other than that, good album. Pretty good. And they're doing some good gigs at the moment, apparently, as well. So he's still got it. Good old Jarv.
Yeah.
Doing his thing. Love it. So yeah, that about wraps it up. Follow us on socials or don't, and keep doing whatever it is you're doing. If you need to sign a record deal, go ahead and do it.
Do it.
Sell out. Because, be an indie band and then sign to a major record label and
Why
let
not?
people decide who you are. Because at the end of the day, who gets to say? It's all subjective. And you be the judge. Billy, have you got any nutritional advice?
Yeah. If you eat sweets all week, you might put on some weight. So just be conscious of that, because I wasn't.
As a personal
That's a
bit of
personal
advice.
one. Yeah.
Okay. See you next week.
See ya.